I've done that now.
You've done that already, right? Okay. I'll just give Dan another second, see if he comes back. Oh, Nigel.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, good evening.
Hi, Nigel.
Welcome.
Is everyone well? Sorry, I'm a little bit late. It sounds like, or it feels like I'm not the only one that's late. So,
no, so one of our professionals just had to log off and he's logging back in. So that's why I was just hanging on for a couple of minutes just to allow him the chance to do that. But I think we might start because I think he's having a few problems. So I think we will begin. If you've just joined us, if you're happy to put your camera on, it would be great because part of this evening is about sort of networking, meeting the professionals. So that would be really good. If you feel really uncomfortable about it, then obviously I'm not going to make you, but it would be great if you're happy to. So official good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this evening. This is one of a number of graduates and student events that we're running through the month of April. Tuesdays and Thursdays, right through to the end of April, with a number of sectors represented at each one. And thank you so much to all of the professionals who very kindly given up your time to come along today. We're very fortunate to have 5 professionals with us within the industries of marketing, advertising, agency and sales, sort of as a sort of very broad heading really. Some of you may know that we normally run a career networking event once a year, and we have been for many, many years. And this is sort of our substitute, if you like, is that we are running a number of them online instead. But we've already kicked off with one of them and it was very successful. So I hope you'll find it really helpful as an opportunity to hear from professionals who are working in the field that you're interested in as graduates or students, and really sort of to hear about their well-trodden paths and to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm Melanie Pearl and I am one of the advisors at Work Avenue. I've been at Work Avenue for nearly 5 years now. My background is HR, human resources, been in HR for a long time, and been giving career guidance or meeting with clients individually for about the last 10 years. My background's, I worked at Legal & General, and then I worked in local government, and then I was the HR director at the United Synagogue. And then about 10 years ago, I started up my own business. And I still run an HR consultancy business alongside my work at Work Avenue, which really sort of means that actually I'm often helping clients as well as helping employers to recruit as well, so on both sides of the table. And joined by Yael Solomons, who's now Job Placements Manager. Give you a chance to introduce yourself as well, Yael.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name's Yael. Some familiar faces to me, so nice to see you. Both professionals and students. I've been at Work Avenue looking after our job side for about 9 years now, so been involved with this event for many years and its different formats that it's taken. I think the best part is when we have students from the past who've become professionals in future years as well. So it's always been, I think, very helpful, really exciting evening for people in terms of networking, finding out information about different careers, different career pathways, maybe things that you didn't know before. So thank you all for joining us, and hope everyone enjoys the evening.
Thank you, Yael. So we're going to kick off by asking each of the professionals to introduce themselves. We sent you an email asking if you wouldn't mind giving a 3 or 4 minute intro about yourselves and what you do. And we'll ask each of the professionals to do that. And then we'll throw everything open to questions for you to question the professionals individually. You'll have heard about their careers, and hopefully this is a really good opportunity for you to find out about something that you really want to go into, or are certainly considering going into. So I'm going to start off with Dan. Oh, Dan is back. Yes, Dan, I'm going to start off with you if that's okay.
No problem at all. Sorry about dropping off, but that, I guess, is our first lesson, right? Is never be worried if technology fails you. You can always pick up and start again.
Totally. Thanks for being here.
No, it's a pleasure. I think it's the 3rd or 4th time I've done this over the last few years, and it's always been an amazing evening. I think Nigel and a few others on there have been alongside me as well when they've been doing it. And it's always been a really, really interesting evening, meeting people who are looking to take that kind of either first step or next step in their careers. My career isn't the most, there's no amazing tale involved. I probably should start with what I do now. I'm currently a director of product and advertising at Sky Media, at Sky for Europe. So essentially building and delivering new technology which will aid advertising sales across all our different, TV or VOD or online or whatever it might be. My career has taken me through a pretty simple story of gradually just getting rid of stuff I didn't enjoy doing. So I started off doing a business degree at Bristol, at University of the West of England, and then went into a small marketing agency where I was doing everything from TV ad buying to press buying to film shoots and all sorts of things. Decided that TV was something that really interested me. Kind of only afterwards did I look back and think, actually, I've spent a lot of time watching TV growing up. So advertising kind of makes sense to kind of follow that route. So came back up to London, joined a couple of different TV advertising agencies where I started, negotiating and buying TV advertising space. Decided that area started to get a bit boring, kind of negotiating and that kind of stuff. It isn't what I wanted to do. So I moved to the BBC, where I carried on doing kind of TV placement and TV planning, but managed to do it without the buying and the dealing with sales houses, which actually ironically is now where I work. And I had a great 5 years at the BBC, working across BBC Sport and then learning radio at BBC 5 Live, before moving to Sky, where I've been for the past 12 years. And for the vast majority of that, I was responsible for trying to persuade people to watch telly. Simple as that, using the space on the channels to get people to watch our programs and buy our products. That was great fun, lots and lots of really interesting people you get to meet, whether it's marketing people or creative people, or actually the teams and the people making the programs, which was absolutely fascinating to see how those guys work. And I kind of just fell into the development side of it, of trying to build systems to make things better, using data to make things better, understanding how what we were doing was impacting the viewers on TV, and kind of got really obsessed with that kind of stuff. And then this opportunity came up to do that on the advertising side within Sky. And I now do that across Europe. So I'm responsible for, as I said at the start, for building our advertising products which sell all the TV space, digital space, advertising on apps and all that kind of stuff, and making sure that all of our countries across Europe that we work in are able to deliver the same kind of thing. And that, in a very quick way, is my career history. I hope that was okay.
Thank you very much. Really, really great to hear. And I think for many people, that would sound like a dream career. I think if I had £1 for every person who said, I really want to work in TV, and marketing, Sky, all those things that I mentioned, you make it sound very easy. How did you get into TV in the first place? Yeah,
it was genuinely almost an accident. But I actually think that's a really positive message, by the way. Lots of you'll always hear from people who come out of uni and go, oh, I really know, or even going into uni, I really know what I want to do. I had literally no idea what I wanted to do. It really enjoyed the marketing and media element of the business degree that I did. And I then started trying to get jobs off the back of it. I went to a number of graduate programs and, failed, didn't get those jobs for whatever reason, probably spilling soup at lunch or whatever it might be. And I ended up in this kind of really small agency. It had 8 or 9 people in it, in Bristol, where I was at uni. And I remember, as part of my how the hell do I get a job piece, I was phoning round, literally the Yellow Pages, phoning round. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. It shows my age straight away.
Equivalent is in, maybe.
I was just Googling it. It was fine. It was fine. And I spoke to somebody, and the person who ran this really small agency, and he pretty much said, "Oh no, a bit busy at the moment. We'll talk again," kind of thing. And I didn't hear back from him for a couple of weeks. And then, completely by chance, I happened to walk past their office, and I just thought, I've got nothing to lose, and I knocked on the door. And an hour later, I'd been offered a job. Yeah. So as I said, it was almost an accident that I kind of very much blagged my way into the first job. Yeah, that's how it all started. And as I say, at that point, I just continue to get rid of, there are lots and lots of different things going on, and I just gradually focused on the bits I liked and got rid of the bits I didn't like. And as I kind of progressed, that became simpler and easier, and that's how I ended up specializing in what I do now.
Thanks very much, Dan. I think I think very often people say, "Oh, it just happened by accident. It just happened by luck," and there's a little bit of that in it. But I think also we make a bit of our own luck as well. But very helpful to hear from you. Thank you very much. Moving on to Jasmine, if that's okay.
It is. Can everyone hear me okay before I
Yes.
go in?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm going to do my best to condense who I am and what I do as quickly as possible, but I have an ability to talk for about 5 years, so please do stop me if I go on for too long.
I will, don't worry.
Okay, perfect. So to kind of give a rough summary of what I am, what I do, I think it all kind of comes under the umbrella of I have always had it drilled into me that I need to speak to absolutely everyone at every single opportunity and be visible, whether that's online, in person, as much as I can. And I think if I caveat who I am with that, it will kind of help as I progress. So I'll start with what I currently do. I work in the wonderful world of influencer and podcast marketing. I'm at a company called Studio 71, which is a very big business in the UK and the US, and we're owned by a very big media company called Prosabian, which also own lots of TV production company type things. But I sort of started out probably whilst I was at school. I was always very interested. I took on every single internship opportunity that I have. I put my hands up and say that I'm from London, so I had a huge advantage that I could very much work for free, and I emailed absolutely everybody that I ever met at work fairs until I managed to get even a day of work experience. And I started out at a company called Pentland Brands, which is a fashion company. They own the likes of Lacoste, Red or Dead, and things like that. Had no idea what I was doing, kind of thought I wanted to be a fashion designer because I think I'd read one magazine of Vogue and thought that was a good idea. But I wasn't sure, but I still, after that week, remember very clearly sending an email being like, if you ever need work again, I'm back. And then the year later, I did the same thing. And then fast forward a few years, I ended up going to Nottingham University, studying American history and American studies in general, because I just, yet again, wasn't 100% sure of what I want to do. And actually, that's quite similar to Danny's story. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do something that I kind of liked. And whilst I was there, following on from my Pentland experience, I'd met someone who put me in contact with a company called Brown-Forman. They own the likes of Jack Daniels and all of those whiskey brands. And I was a fresher, thought it was a good thing to maybe have a conversation with them about potential work, said that I'd done some sort of sales and marketing type internships and was quite interested. Ended up having a conversation with them that ended up with me having a 3-month internship there. And I offered to, yet again, as soon as I went, I was like, if you ever need any work ever, I will come back. I'll come back at Christmas. I'll come back every single uni holiday. I'm not going to go away. And they took full advantage of that because I think I was young, quite interested in music. Jack Daniels is very much targeted to that. So it was kind of like a good relationship. And at the same time, I was writing about hip hop. That's how I ended up kind of realizing that entertainment was a space that I thought was quite cool. And I was writing about that as part of my uni degree. And then I finished university, finished my undergrad. And at the time I was like convinced that I was going to get on the Brown-Forman grad scheme. And I was like 100% convinced. I actually think it's quite important to flag this. I didn't get on it, despite the fact that I'd worked for them whenever I could at any moment. And I was a bit distraught, and I was like, oh no, but I've put so much effort into this. But it turned out to be kind of a blessing in disguise, because I ended up being asked to do a master's in hip hop at both University of Nottingham and Harvard University, which was very cool. Ended up doing that for a year, and at the same time doing movement work and running BBO for a year. So it was kind of mad to do 2 full-time jobs, but it ended up being probably the most valuable thing on my CV, to say I didn't get a grad scheme, but I ended up doing 2 really interesting things. And then after that, through the network that I'd created and still going to all of these events whilst also writing and going to gigs and drinking whiskey and just getting a million things done at once, I ended up getting headhunted through my network for a company called Fremantle, which you might not know the name of, but you probably will know shows like The X Factor, Got Talent, all of those kind of big reality TV shows. And because of my background in both sort of, I guess, brand type stuff and writing, I was approached by their global brand partnerships team, because they were like, you quite like entertainment and you quite like brands. So we're going to basically put you in a global unit where you're just going to basically be in charge of everything from product placement to licensing, and you're going to oversee it in 40 different territories. And I was like, great. So I was in that team, was there for 3 years. At the same time as that, I put myself forward to be on the first ever global shadow board. So I ended up being on this, I guess, shadow board for the global business for 2 years. And so that was kind of like, again, 2 full-time roles that I was kind of balancing at the same time. Got basically to work with the CEO, got to work with all these people. And then after 3 years of that, I was like, it's time for me to go and on to the next place. So I ended up being an account director at a social media agency, and I looked after the L'Oreal group. But yeah, again, it was still doing these sort of partnerships, and having that TV and brand background meant that I was able to kind of create quite long form YouTube-esque content. And then Studio 71 popped up, and because of my history then in social media specifically, and then also long form content, they were like, would you also be curious about taking on an influencer role, doing the same thing, and also working in the world of podcasts and trying to find a way to monetize them. So that's
busy. Sounds like you're a busy lady.
Yeah, and that's where I am now. So tried to do it as quickly as possible, definitely failed. But yeah, that's what I do now.
No, that was great. So, you know, you took us through your history, your career history. Just a very quick question. So you worked in a few different companies. Is that probably a good idea in your field, to work in lots of different companies, or is that just kind of how it happened? Because, you know, the days of being loyal and working in one place for years and years are probably long gone, but particularly in this industry, maybe.
So I think there's kind of two ideas of thought. I think for what I do, which is brand partnerships in social media specifically, things move at a very, very fast pace. So I would say it is expected that you would probably spend between 1 to 2 years in a role if you're not being, and this is me coming from a very millennial mindset, if you are not going to have the progression that you may not necessarily get if you stay in a business, moving around is fine. And that's kind of the advice that I've got. So another key point just on that is I always ask my former bosses and people like that what I should do and where I should go next, and I kind of take what they say as rule of thumb. But I'd say over the last few years, doing 3 roles to kind of get the progression is relatively normal. But I think it is very much dependent on who you want to work for and where your end goal is and what your network is like. So
thank you very much. Thank you. Really, really interesting to hear. A very interesting career. And moving on to Juliet, if I may.
Hi everyone, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So my career history is not as vast as that, but I'll take you through what I do. So I currently work at Mediacom, which is a media agency. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but what we do is we basically plan and buy media. So I've been there for just over 2 years now, and it was my first job out of uni. So essentially, I don't know how much all of you know about media agencies, but basically what we do is we'll work with our clients. Basically, our client will give us a brief. We'll kind of debrief, understand who we need to be targeting, who we need to be speaking to, what channels we need to run with. So whether that be TV, radio, press, social media, that sort of thing. And then we'll work very closely with creative agencies and then people like Dan at Sky to liaise with the media owners because we plan and buy the space. So I'll speak a bit about how I got into MediaCom. So I also had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. Went to University of Birmingham, studied politics and sociology. I think it was in my second year of uni, I did a bit of work experience at Facebook. So that was kind of an insight into all the different aspects of the business. And I just really particularly enjoyed the advertising side. So what I did is I applied they had an entry-level role, which was basically advertising, account management for small and medium businesses. So that was kind of my first experience at applying for a role. So I had a first initial virtual interview and then was actually flown out to Dublin for an on-site interview, which was an amazing experience in itself. Didn't get that role, which I was really sad about at the time. They basically said to me, you don't have enough experience, so go away and get some. So that's when I turned to MediaCom, initially with the thought that I would just apply for a bit of work experience or an internship, and they actually presented me the opportunity to apply for the early talent scheme. So that is kind of what it says, an early talent scheme. It's basically like a grad scheme. So it's for anyone on this call, I guess, if you're fresh out of uni or fresh out of school, or basically early entrance into the marketing or media industry. And it basically involves, and it's an 18-month scheme. So you do 6 months in 3 different roles. So I did 6 months in out of home, which is any ads you basically see on billboards, buses, or anything out of home, basically. 6 months in the comms planning role, which is the upfront client-facing role. So as I said, you're the ones who get the brief from the client. You kind of take the first look at it and decide which channels you want to run with, and then brief out to the specialist channels, like TV, radio, out of home. And then I did 6 months in paid social, so any paid social ads. And then when I graduated from the talent scheme, I basically now do a sort of hybrid role covering both of them. So I'm a comms planner, but then I also specialize in social. So when I brief out to all the different channel roles, I will then plan and buy the campaign within paid social as well. So I think that doing the early talent scheme was amazing. I mean, I'd obviously never studied media, never studied advertising or anything like that. So it gave me a really good chance to basically learn about everything within media and also kind of get an overall understanding of the different channels before I then specialized in 1 or 2 roles.
Thank you, Juliet. I think what's so helpful about what you've said and the other speakers as well is hearing about the differences between the different sectors, because so often I think we meet people, and some of you may be feeling this way. I want to go into marketing, and marketing has so many different facets, and in fact, you know, some of it isn't even marketing. That it's really nice for us to be able to hear, right, okay, this is what you do when you work in agency, and this is what you do when you work in branding, and this is what you do when you work in comms. So really.
And Juliet, just a question. So you said you didn't come from a degree in the field that you're working in now. Do you think it's an advantage if people do, or do you think when you get to it, if you have the right work experience and the right transferable skills and interests, it doesn't really matter?
I think it's great if you do. Obviously, knowledge is great, but I don't think it's a hindrance if you haven't studied media or marketing before, especially doing something like the scheme. I mean, you learn so much in your first few months of being there. It's crazy. So I don't think if you haven't studied it, I wouldn't put it off just because of that. I mean, you can learn so much, and I think you'll find that most people within this industry actually haven't studied it before.
Okay, great, thank you. And Juliet sent me the link earlier, so I'm going to put it on the chat if anyone wants to apply for this scheme. I think you said it closes on 30th of April.
Yes, so actually that's a slightly different scheme, which is something else that they run.
You want to talk about that?
Which is basically a kind of virtual initiative to help people that aren't already in the marketing or media industry. So whether you're just out of uni, just out of school, or just trying to get into the industry, it's a 10-week scheme where you basically just learn all about it. I did share the link with you, Al, so if anyone is interested, or very happy to share my email address if you want more info. But yeah, applications for that close on the 30th of April. So I would say if anyone was interested in getting into the industry, it's a great place to start.
And just to add to that, for those of you who don't know, we also offer one-to-one appointments and various workshops actually, but one-to-one appointments where we can help you to think about how you're going to make an application for a job. So do feel free to get in touch to meet with one of us on a one-to-one basis so that we can help you with that as well. So I'm going to move on to Nigel, if that's okay.
Hi there, thanks Melanie. Well, I've got to say, well done for the group that you've organised, and we've basically got the full stack of representatives across the media industry, the media landscape. So right at the top of the pile, and Dan, you'll love this, you are top of the pile, being client at Sky. So it's good that we got somebody covering on Sky, as in client. When we say client, we mean advertiser in the sense of media budget, and then Juliet and Mediacom. On the agency side, obviously like this media planning and buying, and then Jasmine in terms of creative and content as a relatively wide marketing category box. And then I work at Google, so we're effectively the media owner. So that is obviously the ad content that is being purchased and bought, working across that stack of influencers that we just kind of covered. So I'm sure it was purposefully done, Melanie. So well done in terms of the collective that we've got so far. So a bit about myself. My name is Nigel Fung. I'm the UK sales lead at Waze at Google. So it's a Google-owned platform. I'm sure you guys are quite familiar with Waze. So originally a Tel Aviv tech startup that was bought out in 2013. Back then, it was one of the biggest Google buyouts. Predominantly, that's kind of Google's strategy is, as well as developing their own platforms, it's similar to kind of the battle with Facebook and Microsoft. And Amazon, it's buying platforms that adds to that stack. And the majority of that stack is going to be monetized platform through ad content, and Waze is one of them. So an ads platform, specifically GPS, location-based marketing platform that the likes of Juliet would plan and buy in accordance to her association and partnership with Google as a media owner. So I've been at Google specifically running the sales team at Waze for 4 years now. Flown by. The last year's obviously been a lot slower than the ones up before that for obvious reasons. Prior to that, I worked in outdoor. So I was an agency sales director at a company called PrimeSite, effectively a billboard media owner. You might be familiar more with JCDecaux Clear Channel. PrimeSite's now been bought out by Global Outdoor, which is effectively a new outdoor and radio media owner. That the likes of Dan and Juliet would be speaking a lot with. And I was there for 10 years. So at Google, there are 180,000 staff globally across 90 offices. So a big company, as we know, we all know what Google is. Then when I was at PrimeSite, when I left the company, it was 150. And when I joined the company at the beginning of those 10 years, there were about 25 of us. And then prior to that, I worked at Haymarket, which is back in the day, something called magazines. When people used to buy a lot of magazines, and there used to be a lot of ad content. And obviously, media was in terms of media consumption as magazines as a platform was quite a lucrative market that was covered by publishers. Obviously, a lot of that's been transformed onto more digital platforms, as you guys will be more familiar with. But I was there for 3 years, so good foundation in terms of how I got into media and media sales in specific. And my first job out of university was actually as a currency trader. So I studied economics at University of West of England, same again with Dan, with a lot of similarities. I too have also been here for 4 years during this yearly event that you run, Melanie. And yeah, so I studied economics. And I think somebody asked that question, I think it was Elizabeth, asked that question about what you study as you choose as a degree, as a discipline, what your first role might be. It could be something familiar with what you study as a degree or extra education. But more often than not, it isn't. In reality, I think, understanding a discipline that you might feel that you want to study, to then your first role, work in the workplace and what you have built in terms of your knowledge educationally are always so vastly different. So I thought I'd just tap into that. I studied economics. I had 3 summer year placements at a stockbroker called Cazenove, which is bought out by JP Morgan. Probably more familiar with JP Morgan. And I worked there for 3 summer placements, and it was my first job after university. And I was there for 6 months. And within that 6 months, I quickly discovered that I don't like city folk. So what I then decided to do was take 9 months out. I traveled. I played a lot of snooker with Richard, one of your colleagues, Melanie. He's obviously a keen snooker buff. And finally, when it came to the point of where I actually need to find some income now. It's been 9 months now that I've been basically using the income from the 6 months that I've been working as a currency trader at a stockbrokers. A friend of mine was a recruitment officer, and I think, you know, at your early years, I would say, in terms of discovering what types of industry you're interested in, speak to people that you know that have a wide lens of understanding of different types of industry. And that friend of mine had a good understanding about my personality traits, knew that I was never really fitted to sit in an office from 9 to 5:30, was quite outgoing, quite salesy by nature, and convincing people of my opinions and why they should invest in whatever I'm selling was actually a win for me. Obviously, making sure that the proposition made sense for the clients and the people that were investing in what I'm selling as well. And kind of quickly discovered that maybe media sales would be an interesting angle. So that's when I started the graduate program, a year late, because obviously the 6 months that I spent at stockbrokers at Haymarket Publishing. So that's kind of like a roundabout whistle stop of my CV. You can probably do the maths to work out how old I am. I think I look younger than I actually am, but I've made out. So you guys can be the judge of that.
You absolutely do. Thank you very much. Not that we know how old you are, but
the only person that said yes.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's a really important point you make, is talk to lots of people, you know, find out what they do. Find out as much as you can. Use LinkedIn to get to know more people and to be introduced to more people. But one of the questions, Nigel, that I get asked a lot as an employment advisor is, I want to work in sales, but actually or I want to work in marketing, or I want to work in whatever, but I'd like to work somewhere like Google. That's where I want to be, and I'm not interested in anything else. That's what I want to do. What would you say in response to that?
I think
how to get there, I guess. Ultimately.
How to get there.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the different type of size of companies that I worked at.
Yes.
So as a bank, you know, a global bank like JP Morgan, stockbrokers like JP Morgan, I don't know the number of staff, but obviously an international company with many, many offices. Same again with Google, Haymarket, UK specialist, and then at PrimeSite, which I've got to say were the funnest 10 years of my life, was much more of a startup, cozier feel. It's, you know, you feel like you're not part of a tribe, but you're part of a gang that's making a difference, and you are influencing within that company within there. So I wouldn't simply say, okay, there are these companies that are tech innovators, you know, they sit on the top list of market cap value on the NASDAQ. That's one way of looking at it, as well as the fun platforms and engaging platforms that you guys are probably familiar with as millennials. That's one interesting way. What I would say, though, really, is to work out what is the right cultural type of company for you. And I think that is really undervalued. And I love the fact that Juliet comes from Mediacom, because Mediacom's a great agency that we work with, where, you know, the leaders there, like I'm just trying to think, like Karen Blackett and everybody there, they've done a lot in terms of making sure there's a good cultural fit for the people that work there. And you'll be surprised how that is kind of not a key focus point at a lot of companies. So I'd work out, my advice would be, rather than picking out the brands that you might feel you're associated with, there are brands that you might be familiar with, but it might turn out very, very differently in terms of how they operate inside. And size of company is a big difference. You know, the bigger a company gets, the harder it is to show the value and the worth of everybody that's contributing within the big machine that might be. So do also pay attention to growth tech startups and smaller companies where your contribution will be a lot more quantifiable, and you'll see that impact. And I would advise, you know, in your earliest years, get that idea of, do I like working at a big company? Do I like working at a more of a startup company? Do I like specializing in a certain specific field, but most important, what's the cultural fit? Do they have the same beliefs across the world as you do? Because I think, you know, a lot of people that have quite heated opinions about that right now, and you need to make sure that you get on with your colleagues as well as the position of how the company carries themselves out.
Great advice. Thank you very much for that.
Can I just add to that just really quickly, if that's all right? I had exactly that same thing, which was, where do I want to work? What do I want to do? And the big company, little company thing, I think is really, really fascinating. And it is all down to culture. What I would say, just to add to what Nigel said, is that you can get individual cultures within bigger companies. So I will still to this day say I prefer smaller companies because the culture is better. Yet the last 17 years of my life have been at the BBC, where there's 30,000 people, and Sky, where there's 25,000, right? But there's particular cultures and teams and ways of working that can make it feel like a really kind of progressive, forward-thinking business. And I think that's very different. And I've had that two completely different experiences in two massive companies. BBC, not that kind of thing at all, hated the culture. Sky, forward-thinking, fast, constantly moving, really pragmatic, a great environment to be in. So I wouldn't say it's directly related to big versus small, but absolutely, as Nigel said, understanding and working with that culture is absolutely vital.
Great, thank you very much for that. And I you know, it's interesting speaking to all of you, is that actually a lot of you have worked in both. So, you know, you don't have to start in one and then move to the other, or think, if I don't start there, then I'm never going to get there. There's obviously some movement. I'm going to move on to Daniel now. Daniel Gilbert, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. I can probably pick up directly from where Nigel and Dan left off, insofar as I started my career at Google, and I did this off the back of finishing university. And I wish at that time I'd heard a talk like this, where Jasmine spoke earlier about collecting experience across different industries, because I didn't really have any. I'd worked jobs to try and collect money, because I always enjoyed earning money and paying my own way. So I'd worked, I'd worked jobs that didn't necessarily give me experience in different industry. And I really, when I finished uni, didn't know what I wanted to do. So I finished, and I became fixated on getting a placement at a graduate scheme. I must have applied to 50 different grad schemes at the time. We'll come back to this later, but I failed all the psychometric tests for many of them, for good reason, by the way. And the theme of this is that everything happens for a reason. So all for good, and all's good that ends well. Google were the only ones that were mad enough to let me in. And at the time, actually, Nigel, this has changed somewhat, I think, since you described it as 180,000. It was much smaller at the time. This is 12 years ago, maybe. They really hired off entrepreneurial criteria in a huge way. So that was what they were proud of that. You know, the Dublin office, when I arrived there, was hundreds, maybe low thousands of people. Like, it was not a large operation. So they were just scaling up at the time. And, you know, they saw something in me that I think across the other 49 or so grad schemes, people didn't see. And I should not gloss over, because there's a very happy ending and a successful career, I think, by many measures off the back of it. But at the time, it was a completely disheartening experience. If I could go back to myself 12 years ago, I would tell myself that it'll all be fine, and that it will all work out. And that it was probably good that I didn't end up in KPMG or British Gas or any of the other grad schemes that I was trying to get onto for a rotational experience. So ended up at Google, and I moved to Dublin, and it was great to get there. And I think just picking up off that thread from what Nigel and Dan had said, I was 6 to 9 months into my career at Google, and at that time, even more so than now, Google had a reputation as like the best place to work in the world. Like, it was full stop, undeniably, you know, every award. There was a mystique still around it, because people didn't really know what it was like to work at Google. So some of the stories that you hear now hadn't really come out. You know, it was number one. I'll tell you the personal story as opposed to my business story, but I wasn't happy. And, you know, I looked at this, and, you know, I had amazing colleagues. I was being paid really well, you know, better than my peer set. Google pays excellently. I had the free lunches, the bean bags, the exciting work. I was on projects that, you know, really were making a difference. both to Google, and that was connected quite clearly back to the world. And I wasn't happy. Like, and I don't mean that I was much happier than I was when I didn't have a job, because that was a really, really depressing experience, in all honesty. But at the same time, I knew that it wasn't enough for me. I needed more, and I needed more from a growth upside perspective. And I think this is the difference between small companies and large companies. Despite having had an impact on Google in a meaningful way, it wasn't enough for me. I needed to tie what I was doing back to something that was more, that I could measure the impact of that more directly, and I could feel that I was part of something that, where I contributed and I benefited from that. So actually, the privileged position I was in, it wasn't like I was working at Microsoft, the second best company, thinking, oh, if I could just get to Google, then everything will be great. I knew it was me and not the company, right? Like, I loved the company. I was kind of like, this is great. This is objectively brilliant, but it's not me. So it's not them, like in a relationship, it's not you, it's me. It really was not, it was not them. It was me. And from that, it was very clear to me that I needed to go and start on my own. And that there was this entrepreneurialism inside me, which, I'm pleased that at least I can add a slightly different story to some of the other amazing ones that we've heard so far. And I left and I started a digital marketing agency called Brain Labs. That's the company that I run 9 years, coming up to 10 years later. And we've grown from me in my parents' attic, had to move back home because I didn't want to pay rent. We've grown to 500 people across the US, the UK, and APAC, Singapore. We have the privilege of working with some of the brands that you might have heard of, Financial Times, American Express, Expedia. We've built a pretty sensational business that's probably grown as quickly as, if not quicker than, any other digital marketing agency in the space. What we do is a subset of what Juliet had spoken about that Mediacom do, which is more holistic and more widespread around the whole of media planning. So as is a subset of that, which is just focused on digital. But digital is obviously the part that's growing the fastest, and everyone's quite excited about that. So we've ridden the wave of digital growth. When I left Google, I think like auction-based or digital marketing, as more commonly known, Google search ads were maybe 5 to 10% of total media. And now they closer to the 60% mark when you take into account search, social, programmatic. So this is like digital ads. And the process that you go through on behalf of a client is, like Juliet explained, a client comes and says, I have this budget, or tell me what my budget is. We want to reach more customers online. And we help them plan and execute that across the relevant digital channels. So a fantastic journey for me personally, and I'm delighted to say that now, I have the privilege of expressing the highest version of myself, and the ultimate challenge for me was having a business, because you're the upper limit on that. We also recruit a lot at graduate level. Of the 500 people in the business, I think the vast majority would have started at graduate level, and I think partly because of a lot of what we do is new. We've trained up a lot of people in our discipline. Back to that kind of, do we look for people that have studied media, marketing, comms? Not really, no. In fact, almost the opposite. We're looking for. What
do you look for if you had to sort of give advice to the people in this room? We're not really in a room, but you know what I mean. What would you, virtual room? What advice would you give them in terms of preparation? What are you looking for?
I think I'm not so sure necessarily specifically back to our interview process, but I think if I called almost it back to my own experience doing graduate applications, the disheartening one that eventually ended well, is I wish I'd spent more time up front, along, I think, with the advice from Dan, from Nigel, from Jasmine and Juliet, about figuring out what it is that I wanted to do and where I would be best suited. A large company was never going to be for me, right? If I had done enough soul searching. I just had this obsession because that was what everyone was doing. And, that was the thing to do. And if there weren't law firms that everyone has heard of, or banks that everyone has heard of, and this, that, and the other, then at least it should be a big company that everyone's heard of, because why would I start in a company that no one's ever heard of? The reality is the learning opportunity that I think Nigel spoke to in a smaller company is greater, right? Like, the responsibility that you're going to get is greater. The pay might look different. But actually, as an early doors career opportunity, getting started somewhere is the most important thing. The name on the CV at the beginning, I think, just pales in comparison to the experience that you can collect. And you heard that from Jasmine's multifaceted career at different places, large and small, that you pick up experience and opportunities in places, and that experience will be amplified the smaller that it is. People will take risks on you. You can take on projects, and doing that type of thing in a larger organization is more difficult to do, but that suits other people better. So it's, there is no right answer, but the more, I think, self-aware you are, and I think the more strategic you are as well, is the bit that I would probably try and encourage the audience to think about today. Is, we have the full range of people in our company, that those who have their career planned and what stages they're going to go through, and those who are just kind of going with the flow. And I would encourage you to be more of the former, right? Have a plan, and it doesn't need to be precise, but if you don't know where you're going, then you're not going to get there. And that doesn't mean knowing exactly what you're going to do when. But understanding what the context of what you're currently doing is, and how that fits into a larger picture of what your eventual end goals are. And no one can tell you what those end goals are. You need to define them for yourself. What you want the balance to be between work and life, between financial opportunity, between the quality of the work that you're doing, the impact that it's having, where it sits on the scale of, adding social value to society versus just being a job. Just be upfront and understanding about that in terms of your career choices. And I think,
sorry, I'm only going to stop you just due to time. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Apologies. Just because I'm conscious of the fact that we've got just under 10 minutes left and haven't thrown the thrown things open to the floor yet. But really helpful. Thank you. And as Daniel said, nobody can choose that for you. But what we can do at Work Avenue is help you to work out what it is you want to do. So do feel free to book to see one of our employment advisors, who will be able to help you to think about, actually, what kind of company do I want to work in, what kind of organisation, and what is my end goal, and how do I break where I'm going down into bite-sized chunks so that I actually work out a plan for getting there. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, all really inspiring, and very different stories with yet some overlaps. So I hope that that's given you some understanding of really a number of different areas. Just want to throw things open now to the floor to enable you to ask a couple of questions. Anybody would like to ask anything of anybody? Yes, thank you, Jake.
Hi, thank you everyone. It was very interesting to hear your thoughts. I just wanted to ask, it's an open question, what are people's thoughts on knowing when it's right to move to a different job or company, if you're quite early in your career, or if you've only been at a job for a couple of months? How do you know when it's right to move on, and what should you be looking for when you're moving on?
Okay, thank you. Shall I pass that one on to Jasmine? Would you be able to tell us that? Because I know you've made that decision a few times.
Yeah, of course. I think from my perspective, and I can only speak for my experience, and I know everyone's different, but I think I try and do a 5-year plan every 6 months, and I'm a loser for doing that, and I put my hands up. But what I do with that is I look at what are the things that are important to me, and where do I want to be in 5 years, and what are the steps that I need to make in order to get to that position. And when you look at that and then look at your current role and go, what are the things that I really like, and see if that aligns up to the things that maybe skills that you could potentially be learning. Are there things within the business that could be adding to that 5-year plan? And really weighing up. I would say that it's worth speaking to people that you really trust within your network, not in the business that you're in. So maybe that could be someone that's in your industry. That could actually be, I have a lot of friends that are in consultancy and whatever else, and I speak to them for like a second opinion, because I sometimes think speaking to people that are in your workspace is actually a bit too close, and it's good to kind of get a bit of vetting, and then weigh it all up. And if you've basically got a list of things that you could potentially do, speak to people internally and see what other opportunities there could be that could contribute to your 5-year plan, Because by looking at like a bigger picture, it might be a case scenario that you might not like the day to day, but actually if you look at what every single day is leading up to, it could end up being something much bigger. So I would basically try and do a balance of long-term goal and think about, you know, where do you want to be? And a big part of that will help you work out whether the day to day is worth sticking it out for a little bit longer, fully testing the waters before making a move, if that makes sense.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. Hopefully that answered your question, Jake.
Can I just add to that? I think it's a fantastic answer. And it's probably what I meant by being strategic about your career, is literally what Jasmine just explained much more eloquently. Just a tiny piece to add to that is when not to move, don't do it for a few thousand more. And you know, it frustrates me when I see people move on for 10% more salary or base salary or whatever it might be, and they're sacrificing opportunity and experience, and how that could then map back to a 5-year plan. And I just think, you know, it's hard to think about, because that extra 1,000 might be worth a lot to you at this stage of your career, but it's not worth it, I promise you. Like, the experience is more valuable.
Really important point. I think, you know, we at the beginning of your career, you're keen to get a good salary, but actually it's all about experience at that point. So thank you for that. I've just got time for one more question.
I've got a question if no one else has one. That's all right. Mm-hmm. I'm in my final year of uni, and I did a placement year last year. And obviously, when you do a placement, you're just very happy to get one, and whatever money they offer you is nowhere near as much as the value of the experience you're getting anyway. But coming out of uni, when you are looking for jobs, how much can you, or how much should you, like, negotiate when it comes to pay? Because I always feel like it's a bit of a taboo topic to even talk about. So is there a way of going around that so you can get the best deal for yourself without sounding like you're only focused on the money?
That question to Nigel.
Yeah, you know what, the best way to answer this, my first job at JP Morgan, it took me 4.5, 5 years before I got the same paycheck as my first paycheck. But what I knew was that I was never fit, not fit, but I never saw working in the city in terms of that environment and that culture fitting for me. So there's a sacrifice, and I think Jasmine's already kind of covered in terms of the sacrifice of what you should look for in terms of your pay versus what you're going to absorb in terms of learning. There isn't a fixed number, but I would definitely say make sure that you are valuing your own worth and negotiate. You know, inevitably negotiation is everything in terms of determining your value, as well as selling yourself in terms of the interview process. And part of that is negotiating your package and negotiating your worth. You know, that I would rather much recruit somebody that pays as much ambition in terms of negotiating their package, because it shows that you've got a hungry person that's going to be involved in your team. But I wouldn't fixate on a fixed number. I would look at the first 4 or 5 years as getting your experiences wherever you can, and then working out. You'll probably quickly work out what you don't like before what you do like, if I'm honest, in the first 4 or 5 years.
Great. Thank you very much. The other thing I would just add to that is that the best time to negotiate for when you're starting a new job is once you've got the job. When people ask you, if you're asked in an interview, what salary do you want? Try and offer a range if you have to. Try not to answer the question at all, but if you have to, offer a range. Don't, because you're in your best marketing position once they really want you, and that's when they.
I think as well. Sorry, I would say just to be aware, having worked in some small companies and some big companies, lots of big companies have very set structures on how they pay people, especially at kind of entry level. And actually there is pretty much no room for negotiation in a lot of these situations. They'll have bands and that kind of stuff. So really don't beat yourself up about it. At a smaller company, you've probably got a bit more leeway to have that conversation. But at a bigger company, it's going to be really tough and probably not worth it at all. That would be my brutally honest advice on that one.
You're spot on that, but inevitably they'll pay you what they've got. And in any negotiations, it's determining what the salary cap is. So they'll be honest in terms of salary cap. Well, first and foremost, if you get an offer straight away, you're the candidate they've picked. So take advantage of that. Once you have been given a number and they say they want to employ you, from there on, it is, they're set with you, hoping you're set with them. So that is an area to negotiate, because obviously they want you.
to a
Right.
point. I think that's the, you know, you can negotiate then, and then obviously taking account of what Dan said as well. I think the two of you have made really valid points there. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to all of our professionals, to Dan, to Jasmine, to Juliet, Nigel and Daniel, for giving up part of your evening, your precious time after a day of work. Really appreciate it. You've really helped a lot of people tonight to think about really the distinctions between the different careers within sort of quite a wide area, and also the different companies that you can look at and the different sizes of companies that you can look at. Really helpful. Thank you to all of you, to all our students and graduates for coming along today. Really hope that you got a lot out of it. I really hope that from actually hearing it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, it's more useful than perhaps hearing it from one of us, although obviously we don't like to put down our own services, because we are there to help you as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you soon, and good luck and all the best. Goodbye and good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.